itself more often than you'd think. For example, large-scale migrations have been occurring for centuries and will continue to occur for years to come. They are typically caused by both environmental and political unrest, and are often most problematic because migrants have a difficult time finding a welcoming place to stay. Today, we'll be exploring the three most well-known large-scale migrations in history. Spanning from 586 BCE to present day, let's begin our journey.
The first example of large-scale migration we will be looking at today is the diaspora, the scattering of Jews throughout the world. The Babylonian exile of 586 BCE was the first noteworthy instance of Jewish diaspora. After the destruction of the first temple, the Jews were held in captivity in Babylonia, which led to starvation. The Jews were then deported. Years later, the second temple, as well as Jerusalem, was destroyed. The Jews were continuously discriminated against, denied rights, and blamed for issues that could not have possibly caused, like the plague. Avoiding many of these horrible environmental and political conditions, the Jews shifted from country to country, including Persia, Spain, France, Germany, Poland, Russia, and the US. In their new residence, some lived peacefully, while others suffered from severe anti-Semitism and were even forced to migrate yet again.
The next example of large-scale migration we will look at is the Irish potato famine. In 1845, the potato fungus Phytophthora infestans spread through Ireland, ruining over half the crop of potatoes for the next 7 years. 1 million died from starvation, while others continued to suffer in these poor environmental conditions. To make matters worse, at the time, Catholics were not allowed to own land or vote. Most were forced to be tenant farmers. The Catholic citizens of Ireland were not only starving and living in poverty, but were also being politically oppressed. This unrest resulted in a large-scale migration. Those who could afford it went overseas to the United States, Canada, or Australia. Those who could not afford the trip went to England and Scotland. Although the migrants were in much better living conditions, they were not entirely welcomed in their new countries. In fact, in Britain and Scotland, if an Irish immigrant was proven to not be able to support themselves, they would be deported back to Ireland.
The final example of large-scale migration we'll be looking at today is the ongoing Syrian refugee crisis. Pro-democracy protests first erupted in 2011, and civil war broke out in 2012. With Syrian President Assad unwilling to negotiate with rebel forces and the rise of extremist group ISIS, unemployment and corruption run rampant through the cities. Those who try to fight this oppression are publicly executed or amputated. To add to this lack of political freedom, before the war even started, Syria had a severe drought that limited food supply and caused unemployment. Since then, citizens have been denied access to food, shelter, and health services. Weapons have also been used against innocent civilians. Thousands continue to die from bombs or even chemical warfare. 6.5 million refugees have fled these horrible political and environmental conditions. Though many countries were at first willing to accept the migrants, now countries like Germany have built or plan on building walls, fences, and borders to prevent future migrations. Hungary and Italy are two of the many countries that have begun deporting refugees. Still, millions are stuck in Syria with no place to go.
As you may have seen, migrations are not welcomed by society. For those migrating and the countries accepting them, it takes a long time to overcome the effects of these migrations. But by looking at the recurring and environmental factors that cause large-scale migrations, we can predict the next time history will repeat itself.
Brazil is currently suffering from deforestation, air and water pollution, an increase in forest fires, and too much waste. Both poverty and crime rates are up in Brazil's overcrowded cities. There have also been issues where the police themselves are corrupt and inflict violence, causing fear of the authorities. With Jair Bolsonaro, a man known for his sexist, homophobic, and racist comments, currently polling behind the former President Lula, who is in jail for corruption, the political climate seems to be worsening. These conditions mirror those of the other large-scale migrations we have mentioned today. As the environmental issues continue to decline, with no help from the corrupt government, Brazil may face a migration. Following other South American countries, the migrants will head to the United States. Once there, they will not be met with a kind welcome. In fact, they will most likely be deported back to Brazil.
It's very clear that during large-scale migrations like the diaspora, Irish potato famine, and the Syrian refugee crisis that people leave when there are problems that make them feel dehumanized. These issues are typically environmental and political, such as the diaspora when Jerusalem was destroyed, the Irish potato famine where people left Ireland because of starvation, or the Syrian refugees who have been uprooted from their homes. All of these people want a safe place to live where they can pursue their dreams freely, which is why so many people try to come to the US every year. Unfortunately, it's hard for migrants to find a place to go, as most countries aren't willing to take them. History is bound to repeat itself again. When society sees a country on the brink of a migration, we mustn't say, "This isn't our problem," for it will be when millions of refugees show up at our borders. We also must learn to acknowledge the positive impacts of migration, such as the integration of culture. But that is a story for a different day. Large-scale migration has repeated itself through history and will continue to occur in the future. Little Beast Productions.
Whoa, Professor whom?
Hello.
Hello, Professor Stone.
Baby
Professor Mr. Stone.